Very warm welcome to our IWA shooting expert stage of IWA 2024. We're very happy that you joined, very happy that you're here for our 50th anniversary edition. And to start this thing off and to start the stage, I'm more than honored to have two very famous and guests here, and they are very good experts in their segment. So Ian, thank you for being here, Forgotten Weapons, I think you all know him. And on the other side, Ziga from pt1 Tactical. Thank you for taking your time. And I think today we're going to talk about a very important topic. Ian, we talked about it also when we were at SHOT Show in Las Vegas. We started deep diving a little bit into this discussion because today we're gonna show the differences between US and European gun cultures, and we talk about also events like Links Brutality, because as you might know, IWA was part of Links Brutality last year. We were there for the first time. And yeah, let's see what we can learn from each other in this next 20 to 30 minutes, and hope you enjoy it. Ian, to start things off, as an authority, you might say, on the US gun culture, and how do you perceive the differences between the US and EU gun ownership, but also the use? Is there something you see in general?
Definitely there is. So it's no surprise that the largest difference the most blatant difference between American and European firearms ownership is the regulation of firearms ownership. It is across Europe, it is much more involved, lengthy process to own firearms, and that has ripple effects throughout the entirety of the gun culture. So in the United States, you can basically buy a firearm on a whim. You decide, oh, I think I'll try that, buy a gun, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. In the European Union, you usually, depending on the country, you'll have to join a club, you'll have to shoot for a period of time, show proficiency, take a bunch of training before you can ever buy your first firearm. And what that leads to are people who are much more invested in the shooting that they're doing. Doesn't necessarily mean they're better, doesn't mean American shooters are worse, but it means there's a much smaller community and they're a much more dedicated community. And so, for example, there are firearms in the United States that would never sell here because they're really guns that are purchased more for recreation, for entertainment. They don't appeal as much to the European audience. I think there is also, on a more nation-by-nation basis here, there are different sports that are particularly entrenched in the national cultures, and those specific shooting sports form the core of shooting clubs and teams, and that's the road that you have to follow to get into firearms ownership, and so you'll see much more membership in specific shooting styles. Where in the United States, we have far fewer formal organized shooting clubs. And so we have both a wider variety of shooting competition styles and a less formal structure to many of them.
So it's fair to say that, first of all, it's a cultural thing, as you said, and then you have the whole legislation in the European Union, what makes it more difficult for everybody even coming to this sport. So yeah, this is something I think you're very familiar with. As someone who deals a lot with shooting and are very successful with your channel, pt1 Tactical, you also see the growing interest in Europe into the shooting sports and shooting. But on the other part, you have to deal with all those restrictions and the less cultural thing that you would have in America. But in your experience over the last year, what are some of the key factors driving more interest into that shooting segment in sports shooting as you do? What do you think? Why are the people getting more and more interested also when it's so restricted?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing is, of course, a bit of popularization with media, something that we also do with our YouTube channel, but essentially just trying to get the message out that even in Europe, people can own legally firearms and they can use them recreationally, they can use them for hunting, sport shooting, different kind of things. I would just maybe add something to what Ian said before. Essentially for me, the biggest difference from US gun culture and maybe Europe and other world is that in US you have a right to own firearms and everything stems from that. But here in Europe, essentially, it's just a privilege. You have to prove that you are safe enough, good enough, legal enough. Everything, you have to prove that you get the firearm, and then you can also lose the license quite easily if you do something wrong. So I think from that stems the biggest difference. But yeah, we saw, actually, despite the new European directive that kind of restricted a lot of things for us, we still saw a resurgence, a bigger interest for gun sports, for sport shooting especially. Some of it coming from the US, for example, with Link's Brutality. And yeah, definitely. So.
Okay. Ian, you know the events that Ziga does with Polymer Tactical, Link's Brutality. You also been guest to Finnish Brutality. Shout out to Vastuleika. These events, they are getting more and more into Europe, and they seem to be very successful. They're sold out immediately, they attract a lot of media interest and also a lot of interest from the company side. Despite their American inspiration, what aspects of American gun culture do you find in that particular event? And what do you think resonates most with the European gun culture when it comes to events like this?
Well, the biggest difference, I think, stems from, in the United States, one of the foundational tenets of having a right to bear arms, a basic right to own weaponry and firearms, is one of individual martial proficiency. That the military skills are something that are worth developing, and that's, as a cultural thing, aside from legal issues, in the United States, there is, that is a recognized thing that's a skill set you can develop, and it's valuable and it's appreciated. And I think there's a lot less of that in Europe. There's much more of a distinction drawn between, if you are in the military, then you develop martial skills, and if you are not in the military, you do not. And in the United States, there's much more of a blending of that. It's not unusual to be someone who works as a plumber or a software technician and is a competitive shooter on the side or a firearms collector on the side without having any military, specific government military connection. And so I think what we are seeing with the brutality matches is a shooting sport that's fundamentally based in developing martial-based skills, showing up in Europe, and I think we have a lot of people who are thinking like, wow, I didn't realize that was an option in shooting sports. I thought shooting sports meant standing very still and shooting a very small group with a very precise firearm. There's this whole other world of military-based competition, and there hasn't been much of that in Europe, and I think being introduced to that is an exciting thing for a lot of shooters over here, and I think that's why Finnish Brutality and Link's Brutality have become so popular. It doesn't hurt that Ziga does a fantastic job, as does Vastuleika, in developing and running those matches. They're fantastic events.
Yeah, and I think it just shows that there is general interest also in Europe. It's not that the Europeans in general are not interested in, as you said, experience this different style of shooting sports. And that's, I think, a new way, as you do it, to give them access to that. So that's, I think, also a reason why these games are so popular. Ziga, from your perspective, how do you think, as the organizer of Link's Brutality, think that these initiatives can contribute on bridging the gap between not only the American and the European gun culture, what we like to deep dive right now, but also how can they positively influence the positive image on firearms within the European society? Because that's fair to say, I guess, for the people who are not used to it, at the first sight it could be kind of disturbing. So what do you think, as the organizer, how big is your influence?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a couple of layers. First one that I would say is that what we do with this kind of brutality matches, where people also have to compete with military style gear, with in certain divisions they have to have a ballistic plate carrier, they need to have certain gear that infantrymen would wear. So it is kind of, we're pushing the boundaries. Even in Slovenia, this is not strictly forbidden by law, but it's frowned upon. So essentially we are on that limit where some people from the government are looking at us and thinking like, these are crazy guys, I don't know, like training for something. And then on the other side, you have also maybe older shooters, older hunters that are more traditional, They also kind of frowned upon this. But on the other side, I think we are opening doors for a different kind of shooting community where it's more open, because everyone that comes to Linux Brutality and experiences firsthand, they will see that everything is done by strict firearm safety rules. We use the same rules that IPSC uses, so it's on a really high standard. If people do something wrong, if it's a safety issue, they get DQ'd. They are stopped from competing, they have to go home. So we try to involve a lot of safety, and the other thing that is very important is this is not something, this event is sport shooting. However you look at it, people are competing, people are having good time,